Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. Hey guys, before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. They've been telling me to put this at the top of the broadcast instead of at the end because people are more likely to catch it. So remember, Jacob Fluharty, my friend, is joining me for a discussion today on the divine masculine, the divine feminine, and how it pertains to the concept of twin flames. But if you want to book me for a tarot reading or a life coaching session, you can find me at therisingmoon.com. And my YouTube channel is Cronecast at the Rising Moon. You can find Jacob at Southern Style Readings on Facebook or Southern Style Readings at gmail.com. Hey, I don't have my ring light on today, so if you're watching the video version on my YouTube channel, it's going to be a little bit dim. I just didn't feel like having the light in my eyes today. So, guys, Jacob took point on doing the psychological research on this particular concept because psychologists have been looking into it because it became such a thing in the last 5 to 10 years, which is the twin flame concept, and how that relates to the idea of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Hey, before I get started, I want to talk about something where there's a light attribute and a dark attribute in both the divine masculine and the divine feminine. In its best version, the divine masculine is protective and caretaking, something that can nurture you towards independence. In its worst or its dark aspect, its negative energy, it is controlling, abusive, and reductive towards its female counterpart. The thing is, the divine feminine also has a light and a dark aspect to it. So the light aspect, of course, is the creating of life, nurturing, caring, healing. The negative aspect can be actually things like manipulating emotions, manipulating the truth, abandoning children, instilling codependency in children. There's a laundry list of both the light and the dark aspects of this. And part of the reason that Jacob and I are doing this episode is there has been, throughout the course of me doing this on YouTube in particular, there has been a lot of, I'm not going to say evidence, but a lot of indication that potentially twin flames are actually a magnetic attraction in which it is your opposite energy. So particularly if you're in a very healed place, that's where the narcissist and the empath paradigm can come from. I'm not saying all twin flame connections have to do with narcissism, but rather that there is some reason to believe that if you're in a place where you need a lot of healing, the person that you will be attracted to has all of the stuff that damaged you in the first place. And that it's something that you need to consider, that it's non-matching or non-compatible attachment styles. Now, as you heal, by the way, you can find more and more people who are like energy attracts like energy. But most twin flame connections start out in this runner and chaser dynamic. And it does appear to have to do with the light and the dark aspects of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Hey, Jacob, how are you doing today?
Doing great, thanks.
Jacob, you did a whole bunch
of together.
No worries. Jacob, you did a whole bunch of research for this and a bunch of reading because your background is actually in psychology. Do you have anything to add to my introduction there?
You actually covered a lot of it pretty well. I was surprised to find as much information as I did because I had only really been, subject to this idea through the esoteric community, and it was huge when I first started. What was that back in 2019? Seemed to be like that's all anyone was talking about. A lot of the readings that I was being asked to do there at the beginning were about this twin flame idea, and I'd never really fully understood it. But this concept of a soulmate, which come to find out is different than the concept of a twin flame, as I did my reading, seemed to just it was never really something that I bought into too heavily anyway. So I was always a little bit jaded as far as the idea system goes anyway. But come to find out that it's starting to enter into more fields of psychological academia right now. More and more people are looking into it. So yeah, I'm actually pretty fascinated by the things that I learned, and that it's even being talked about in some of these academic circles. It's not something that I would have expected.
Because it's so prevalent. And when we need to talk about its origin, which is how I started looking into it, was one day I was just like, where did this even come from? Because it came out of kind of nowhere for me in almost the same capacity that it did for you. I was very familiar with the idea of soulmates, and we have many different types of soulmates. But the idea of a twin flame, it finally occurred to me that is your mirror image. In your mirror image,
Hmm.
everything is reversed. And so it literally is the opposite energy to you, which means that if you're very loving and giving, somebody will be very avoidant and unemotional. And that is a person that you may be very, very attracted to as you try and balance out your own energies. Now, hey, before we keep going with
Hmm.
this, because twin flame connections are very closely linked to people who are trying to recover from codependency, I just want to put a little bit of a trigger warning at the top of this. Hey, if you're not in the space to hear this, just, peace out now. We're not here to upset anybody, but usually these things drag on long enough that people want real answers. And so that's what we're like delving into, are the people who are trying to understand, was it a karmic relationship? What happened? Is this person ever going to be in my life again? What is supposed to happen with this very intense connection? And one of the reasons that I began to wonder, it's like, can this possibly be healthy? Is now, first of all, did I have what I thought was a twin flame connection? I did, but a very long time ago, I came to the conclusion that it was as the result of some magic that I did to protect myself. Because when leaving a toxic marriage, I basically was attracted to somebody that nothing was going to happen there, because of a variety of factors, but also this person is a raging alcoholic and has multiple addiction issues. I'd known him for about 20 years. The entire time I'd known him, he'd been trying to quit smoking and never being successful. He was in complete denial about his alcohol abuse, although he was still he still would drink to the point of blacking out. And if you're familiar with me at all, the way I found out that I was connected to a divine source or a spirit guide or the Archangel Gabriel is what I eventually found out it was when I was woken from a house fire when I was 12 by a voice that was telling me to wake up. The house was on fire and seemed to actually like cause me to fall out of bed as well to wake me up. So my alcoholic grandmother had set that fire. Now, it wasn't intentional. I don't believe so, but she did actually
Hmm.
set a room on fire and move to the opposite end of the house. And she was pass out drunk, and she often was. And so my whole adult life, I have been very careful about not getting involved with people who drink. So there was always that element to it where it appeared to be simply, in my case, that protective spell and then something called codependent transference. Because the relationship that I had stayed in became very, very toxic. And when it becomes almost impossible to leave a relationship, even when you recognize there's nothing good here, I got to get out, I got to get out. And yet you still can't take the steps towards it because usually you've become very dependent on that person, either emotionally or quite frequently financially, as was the case in my case,
Hmm.
where there was like
Hmm.
really no emotional support for me, but he controlled every dime that ever came into that household. And it was, not to, that's kind of water under the bridge for me. So I'm going to let that one go by. But in the aftermath of that, the idea of a rebound relationship is often a transference relationship, and it is literally inevitable for people in a codependent space. And I did not know that when I was leaving my ex husband, but the spell that I did that invoked 4 archangels, actually 5, to protect me. The thing that you need to know if you're doing any form of magic and they're invoking archangels is they get it done expediently, but they may not it's not gentle stuff. And so it was a very emotionally painful situation for me. And nothing ever happened with that, and nothing ever will. And I'm fine with that. I was logically aware of how unhealthy a choice it would be for me. Because on top of
Hmm.
that, this person had sent me emails detailing what can only be described as narcissistic abuse against his then girlfriend, who I had been led to believe he had broken up with, or it never would have happened in the first place, where I thought I had feelings for this person. And is that person, do we have similar interests? Yes. Are they the polar opposite of me? 100%. But it's not just my experience that I'm basing this on. I'm going to tell a story about how I began to understand that tarot cards can reflect an ungrounded future when it comes to twin flames. I need everybody to understand before I start this was a friend, this was not a client. So this was somebody who we would talk on the phone and I would give her readings, and she was a really delightful person. We have very opposite views on many things and we're no longer in touch, but she was a good friend of mine for a while. And she had been involved in a brief but intense relationship. I'm not going to include any identifying details, but they were engaged at the month mark and broken up by the 90-day mark. And he immediately met somebody 4 days later and swiftly moved in with that person. But this person would get reading after reading, and all of the readings were returning that he would return to her, that he would realize he made a mistake, because she was utterly bereft and heartbroken. And so usually that's what I was reading on. But I have a habit of shuffling cards while I'm thinking. And when I'm on the phone, sometimes I don't do it any longer because I started getting really like, I didn't want to know that kind of readings, but I would put out cards. And as I was talking to her and she was talking about this person, I laid out a spread. I looked down, and unlike every other reading she had ever gotten, and not just from me, it was very clear he was buying a house with that person. He was going to marry that person, and he was never coming back in that reading. And I was like, what the heck is this? I thought it was some sort of misfire. I would later come to realize it was that she wasn't focusing on it. It was her will that was controlling the false outcomes, because in fact, there wasn't a future and that person was not coming back. And when somebody is not coming back, sometimes an ungrounded reality, which is a potential future but won't be in this reality, is the thing that comes through in the cards. And I started seeing that. And I used to do twin flame readings, and I used to talk about it very differently. But over the course of about 4 years, I noticed it was happening to everybody, and literally none of them came back in any healthy capacity. And that, honest to goodness, a lot of the times when people manage to let go, it almost drew the person back. And every time that I've managed to let go of any form of unhealthy attachment, in fact, it seems to try and come for me in a different shape or form. But because I've really committed to I'm staying single till I'm absolutely well, it has been fun to watch the progression of, like, that person's wildly unhealthy, like the first person. The second person was married and kept pressuring me to have an affair with him. And he's a terrible human being. Not because of that, marriages, not everything's equal. Different relationships have different things. It's not something I was willing to do. But over the course of time, I realized this person never told me the truth. And we never got involved at all. And there were 3 people after that where they were coming towards me, but I had more logical, everything I held up to in the head and the heart battle, I was like, it's got to pass the head first. And if it's not passing the head, I don't care what my heart is saying, my heart's healing from something. So that's my personal background on it. Hey, Jacob, can you share a little bit of what you've been finding out through your research about the idea of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and what twin flames really are?
Excuse me. Well, unfortunately, everything, most of the things that I read, especially things that were not through more esoteric publications, don't really paint twin flame relationships in the best of light,
Yep.
Which is something that I thought was interesting. The word that gets thrown around a lot, excuse me, in the research that I was reading, is this word called limerence. And basically, it is like an attachment to a person or an object. It can be an object. And oftentimes it is in a a non-sexual capacity, or even not even like a romantic capacity, but there is just this intense, almost spiritual connection that a person, feels towards another person or an object. And they like to bring up the story of, oh gosh, I'm gonna mess it up, I bet, but Plato and his idea, the Greek idea of yeah, yes, we all used to be humans used to be two arms, two sets of arms, legs, two faces. The gods thought that we were going to become too powerful, so split us in half, and then we spend the rest of our lives kind of searching for this other half that we've lost, right? And so they use this story to kind of give you this visual of what your twin flame yearning is, right? So that's the big word to keep in mind as we talk about all this.
Yeah, your counterbalancing energy would make perfect sense with the idea of the platonic split apart. Yes.
Right, exactly. And so whenever we talk about this, excuse me, idea of you attracting your opposite, that's kind of what it comes into. And then they talk a lot about how almost all twin flame relationships go through these same stages, right? So you get started in the yearning stage where, you are constantly feeling like something is missing and you're looking for something. And then you get to the meeting stage where you finally find that object of your almost, I don't want to use the word obsession, that's a little heavy, but the thing that you've been looking for. then you move into like falling in love, and then you have your honeymoon period. But things start getting a little weird after that, right? Because then you start almost always enter into like a turmoil, or like a phase where things are being tested. And then we get into our favorite runner chaser dynamic, which is almost always a part of the equation. And then
You're an
you enter
avoidant
into this.
attachment styles in psychology.
Exactly. And then you enter into this period where you kind of like surrender yourself into this space where like both of you are, your egos are relaxing, and like you're learning things about your nature based on the nature of the other person. Excuse me. And then they finally come into this idea of oneness, or like where the two have become so intermingled that they are finally able to achieve that oneness, quote unquote, that they've been searching for.
That's a
And
spiritual
that
template, but it doesn't often follow that way in real life, is what we've been finding
sure,
out.
sure,
See,
right. And
that's
like in like
something that's
most
been
things, this
put
is just
forth
like
in spirituality, that we will start out with like this perfect union, and then the runner is overwhelmed by the intimacy and has to run away. But if they surrender to the protection of the union, they will return. And like that's a very good story. And by the way, everybody needs to understand the twin flame concept actually came from a spiritual guru in the 1970s, which are
yep.
all just incredibly famous for basically enabling toxicity within relationships. And so part of the reason I started, like, I won't do twin flame readings on YouTube any longer. And when somebody comes to me with a twin flame, I talk to them about how it's a form of attachment that you need to heal. That usually, like, the only path to peace is letting go. And part of the reason I understood that something probably had to do with protective magic was I wanted to be single so badly for the last, I want to say, 5 years of my marriage. Like, I just, the constant thought in my head was, I just want to be alone. I just want to be alone. I just want to be alone. And so even the idea of having intense feelings for somebody was not like, it wasn't comfortable. And there was always a part of me that's like, I didn't want this. I wanted to be by myself and independent and not needing anybody other than me. And it's not that it means, there's extreme independence in a healing phase. It wasn't about that. It was that I was never going to, and have yet to have, another relationship that had any form of need contained in it, because I was aware that codependency was a form of addiction. And it's not like, when you hear the word addiction, please remember it's a trauma response. It is frequently about an attachment trauma in your formative experience that leaves people vulnerable to this. That is what forms your attachment style. Either it is in your nurturing experience, in your social experience, or in your personal or professional experience. So when it comes to twin flames, what often happens is that the person matches the energetic blueprint or the psychological type of the person who withheld caretaking from you or nurturing from you. In my case, my freaking grandmother. Now, my ex-husband, a lot like my mom, who I've talked about before, very toxic narcissist. And then this person was, I believe, just suffering from a severe addiction versus having the same toxic personality. But I could be wrong. I just genuinely could be wrong.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny you bring up addiction, because it's like all the stuff that I was reading is they do liken it to, so when we like talking about limerence in specific, they liken this to like substance use disorder, or even obsessive compulsive disorder, whereas the same kind of like modalities are like you're exhibiting the same kind of like traits. And not that there is a need for treatment, but there are people who have this limerence attachment that is so severe that it does require some sort of intervention. And the treatment modalities for that are almost exactly the same ones that we use for patients who have like obsessive compulsive disorder, which I found
everything
fascinating
relates.
as well.
All those spiritual concepts, actually, part of the reason I talk so much about psychology and very 3D things is that if you look at the spiritual concepts, there is an echo in it. Like almost everything that Jung came up with, the tarot was talking about 600 years before, for real. So there's a foothold within spirituality. We need to define limerence, which is basically infatuation, and frequently as well. And please, if you have been in this dynamic, please understand most of the time it's your higher self trying to protect you and trying to help you, teach you a lesson as well, and trying to help you heal. So it's not about being sick. It's about being injured in your attachment style and in your emotional style. And here's the thing about it, because it is being likened to an addiction or compulsivity in many scientific circles. You might hear that and it's the worst thing you've ever heard. It's like you can't even bear to hear it, because there is basically, when you challenge somebody, it's why any type of intervention has a tendency to go so poorly. People protect their addiction because it's very need-based. It's part of their identity, and they don't realize they're doing something incredibly destructive. And so frequently when people hear things like, part of the reason your cards, which when you get a card reading, what your outcomes are controlled mainly by your higher self. Your higher self stands outside the stream of time, and you will be told what you need to know, and sometimes led down a path towards healing. And again, as it went on in my own readings, and I just saw these really wonderful human beings with so much love to give, who were very focused on somebody who, like, they weren't healthy enough to have that level of focus on them. Like, even when there were real feelings there, what really happened was it's like, this person is not doing their work. They're frequently, they have a fear of intimacy. They're going to be this runner or avoidant person, and they're not doing their stuff. So you need to heal your stuff and let go. And if this person is truly a twin flame, what happens is that they also come into balance. And can you come together at that point? Allegedly, yes, but like, honest to goodness, I don't even want to talk about the hundreds of people with twin flame connections that I've seen in the last 4 years. I have not seen any work out. And that was the biggest red flag of all. And so I'm not seeking to hurt anybody. And again, if you're not in the space to hear any of this, remember, you have your own path. Different people have different answers, and you don't need to feel threatened or frightened by this. But if you're at the point in a connection where I have seen people where, again, I can't really share anything that contains client details, but people hanging on past the point that they logically should, to be self-protective and self-loving. And I'll go back to the example of the person who was my friend, who kept hanging on even after this guy was buying a house with this other person, and kept hanging on even after he was going towards a formal commitment with this person. And it was a very difficult thing to see, because again, such a wonderful human being, such a loving human being, but this person that she was very, very interested in, every red flag in the book, including relationships that move way, way too quickly, which is one of the signs of codependence. Things take time to establish in a real manner. So, Jacob, you're taking points still on, what they suggest you do in the psychological community, because I have a full treatment plan for people in spiritual communities where I have them doing attachment removals and cord cuttings and exercises around self-worth and neuro-linguistic programming to learn how to talk to themselves. Because one of the things that can happen in the most intense connections is that people believe they're having a telepathic conversation with the other person.
Yes.
Yes. And is it true? It is possible. It is true. But what is also possible is that our mind has the ability to create that which we need. And so it is very possible that it is a function of your own mind. And the easiest way to understand this is, if anybody saw the movie Castaway, Tom Hanks has said over and over again, he got to the point he heard Wilson's voice. And that's the volleyball. Because that was how focused he was on, I don't think he set out to be method, but he kind of had to be because of the need for the weight loss and a couple of other things. But he has talked about, he literally heard Wilson's voice in his head. Wilson was a volleyball. If you really are trying to connect to something, your mind has an ability to fill in those gaps. Now, it is also truly possible that you're connecting to that person's higher self. There's no real way to tell there, but the important part is, if something isn't in the 3D, start questioning whether or not it's actually good for you. If someone is ghosted in a relationship, if somebody has cut off contact, if somebody has gone on to marry another person, as a for instance, which I've seen that happen as well, where somebody was still waiting and waiting. And I will tell you the point at which I really started to become concerned outside of my friends was I was doing a live reading on YouTube, which I did during COVID, just to try and keep people's spirits up. And somebody came on and was talking about how they've been waiting for 6 years. And that was the most alarming sentence I had ever read in my life. Because it's like 6 years? 6 years? Oh my
Like
God.
they were waiting on one person?
One person. One person for
Oh,
6
goodness.
years.
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
like, you've got to let go for your own good. Let go of this person. Even if you mean the world to them, they're not in a healthy enough space to come back into your life if they've been gone for 6 years. Let them go on their way. And one of the wisest things that I ever encountered in a spiritual community is if somebody is trying to leave your life, let them go. Let them go because they're
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
not treating you properly. Please don't think that you can win over somebody with your devotion, that they will recognize that only you truly love them, because they might or they might not. But what really happens is you're spending all your time giving your love to somebody who's not giving anything back, and you need that love for you, and you need that love for the
Right.
relationships that would serve you as well. So, Jacob, what does psychologists recommend here?
So you'll have to chime in because I don't deal with a lot of people anymore who espouse this kind of like connection. So I'm looking at
Why?
this from a much more like kind of just academic sense. But like I referenced earlier, the the quote I don't want to use that word. The way that they recommend you go about your life moving forward. It's basically the exact same approach that you would use if you were experiencing like uh, OCD, right? Extreme compulsivity. Because a lot of the times in these limerence relationships that we see, there are rituals that are involved within it as well, and aptly named the limerent ritual. And and so, like with the one study that I read, there's this woman, and she was having this, limerent experience with a coworker. It was totally non-sexual. It was not anything like that. It was just. It's oftentimes we find, well, with the research that has been done, it is oftentimes almost like a mentor-mentee relationship, whereas someone who has this limerent affection towards someone who is older, who is perceived to have, like their lives a little bit more put together, who, has achieved the things that maybe the client, wants to achieve in their own life. And so the modality is basically the same as we would use for compulsivity, where it's like you need to try and like recognize the rituals, that you are engaging in, doing exposure therapy, which is in this case being around the limerent object and stopping yourself from engaging in the compulsivity, and
That's
then
often not
using
possible for people who have been ghosted. And so what you have
right.
to do is reprogram your patterning. And it's covered in our trigger episode, what you can do, because it is a form of trigger that you're dealing with. Because that is what a trigger often is in PTSD and CPTSD, is it is something that spins you out into a compulsive, safety-seeking behavior. So we'll see it where the thing that I would notice, and the thing that really tipped me off to, I need to stop doing any of these type of readings. And I included love readings in that, was I would get up in the morning and find comments, and I would see people who had watched 5, 6, 7, 8 love readings in a row. And it's that's compulsive. That's a compulsive behavior. Now, does compulsivity, is that the very first cousin of addiction? Yes, it is. Because it is something
right.
you cannot control unless you can overcome it. And so I do have a program that I put people on to try and start reprogramming their energy. And it works because I did it for myself. And I'll tell the story that I told you not that long ago, after we go back to you for, if it's not possible to do exposure therapy because the person is not present in your life, what you have to do is exposure therapy, where you're triggered towards looking for them online, because a lot of people stalk their people on social media or in other manners, or they will go to YouTube and they will watch pick a card after pick a card. Is you quite literally, it's like quitting smoking. The only way to quit smoking is to not pick up the cigarette. But in the interim, it's a very useful tool to have something that you do instead. And for me, cardio always worked. That's how I actually literally quit smoking, was I just became a cardio doing fiend. And I did a lot of cardio around breaking this as well. And I have actually entirely broken it. It literally does not happen to me any longer. When I think of the person that I thought was a twin flame, it's a little sickening to me. And it makes so much sense to me that it was part of that protective magic, because even as it was going on, it's like, but wait, he's an alcoholic. And it's not about judging alcoholism. It's about one almost killed me. So I have some damage around that. Like, I really, like, I talk about that house fire, but like the firemen just couldn't believe I lived. They're like, how did you even pick up? I'm like, well, I did not walk around telling them. Technically, a voice other than my own woke me up, and I think it threw me out of bed too. Like, I was 12, and I didn't, even at that age, I was like, well, that seems like it's not the stuff of sanity, but I knew I hadn't dreamed it. And so I really didn't talk about like having an interaction with spirit guides or basically the Archangel Gabriel for most of my adult life. So back to you on if we cannot do the exposure therapy, because most people in twin flame connections cannot.
Yeah. So at that point, it's basically, so the study that I'm referencing the most heavily is the opposite, right? She was a coworker, so we couldn't, they could not, like, eliminate them hanging out at all. So what became the main treatment goal was to control, oh my gosh, my brain stopped working. The rituals, to control the rituals, right? To recognize when they were happening and to try and mitigate them whenever possible. So yeah, reducing compulsions instead of reducing contact. So we would just focus on that, reducing the compulsions, and like you said, like the social media, looking up things like that. Another one that was seemed to be really popular among people with limerent connections were obsessive photos, like looking at photos obsessively, going back and looking at albums that you may have together. Like, I was not in a limerent relationship, but like right after my divorce, for instance, I looked at my wedding album multiple times a day for who knows how long. Like, so things like that, where when you're trying to find that comfort in that, relationship that you,
it's a codependent,
right. And as much as, I don't want to like beat a dead horse or bring it up again, does seem to be like a very big part of at least what the psychology is saying is about these relationships. And it is a very like almost codependent transference in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's basically just dealing with, those different rituals that you have. And then like almost everything else, moving into like a cognitive CBT, excuse me, a CBT practice where you're starting to restructure, how you're looking at things and how you're reacting to things. And then you brought up cardio. That's almost exactly what this patient in this study did as well. It's like trying to find ways to alleviate those rituals, and exercise
chemistry in a healthy manner. Changing your brain chemistry in a healthy manner is what that's about. I had a rule around, I would drink a big glass of water, eat something healthy, and get some exercise. And
that's basically what they said.
It basically changes your brain chemistry and takes you into a more positive space. It 100% worked. If you are hearing any of this and it is distressing to you, where it's like, no, this hurts. No, I want this person so badly. I beg of you to stop and consider logically, have they treated you well? Because the thing that all of these have in common is they ghost somebody, they ignore their outreach, they did not in any way demonstrably reciprocate after a certain point. And that is actually emotional neglect and a form of emotional abuse. It will not go well in relationships. And I will tell you honestly, there was a point when, because, codependence is a form of addiction. And even though I've been telling myself for 5 years, I just want to be alone, I just want to be alone, my brain chemistry had been altered by being in a traumatic and dependent relationship in which I had no power. I had no real power. And he took his moods out on me always. I'm not going to say constantly, I'm going to say always. If he was in a bad mood, everybody needed to take some cover. And like that was just his personality. And like I really convinced myself at one point that he had a blood sugar problem because of how pronounced it was. Um, but even though I wanted to be alone, my brain chemistry was not prepared for me to be. And so either
Hmm.
through that magic or just the fact that I'm, a very resilient and resourceful person, my brain chose a target that it would not work out with. And it was safe transference. And I worked through it and worked through it
Hmm.
and worked through it. And it was hard. It was hard. But I will tell you now, I thank every power in the universe that it did not work out, because I will not share what was in those emails, but they were terrifying for what he thought he was doing to control his girlfriend. And like looking
Yeah.
back now at what was said, it was very much. I will share one thing. He literally thought he was controlling her thoughts and what she said. And
Hmm.
that is not something anybody wants to get involved with. And that was something that was shared with
Yeah.
me. I also super sick and saying things in readings or in emails that it's like, well, you weren't well. No, I really wasn't well. I had been in an increasingly toxic relationship in which I was being very badly gaslit. And my ex husband was pretending multiple things that luckily I'm just so lucky I knew. I'm just so lucky that I knew that he was not
Yeah.
telling the truth, because he was very much trying to screw with my reality base. And I thought he was insane versus doing it intentionally. And so I wouldn't leave him
Hmm.
because I was like, well, you can't leave a sick person. And it was only in the aftermath that I was
Yeah.
okay, he was doing all that on purpose. And yes, that is a form of illness and sickness, but it's not the type that you stick around for because it will just destroy you. And it turned out
Hmm.
to be the very best thing that could ever happen to me and has kept me very, very safe indeed. And every time that I feel an attraction towards somebody, I'm very good about kind of weighing it out. And I was talking to you the one about the guy who turned out to have a very bad temper indeed, and that like it
Hmm.
happened in a way that kept me very safe from it. And it's very mild in comparison in terms of toxicity to what I would have been encountering in the past. But it definitely was another like, I am attracted to people who are not good for me. I'm attracted to people who
Hmm.
are almost the exact opposite of me, which is exactly what twin flame. And you will continue to have those type of attractions until you become balanced within. And so when we're talking about reprogramming and doing some things around exposure therapy and choosing a different path, like every time you feel yourself compelled to do something, instead you got to choose the healthy path. It's crossroads after crossroads after crossroads after crossroads. But I'm a
Hmm.
crossroads guide, so I was really comfortable with that. Remember, you are the only person that can choose to save yourself ultimately. And so it does rely on your strength of will. And that's why I'm so glad that I've done magic my whole life, because I know I have willpower out the wazoo. And it helped me tremendously. And honest to goodness, because I had multiple opportunities after that, because of just some factors that I kind of just won't go into, even though I wouldn't date, people kept finding me. I'm so glad each and every one of them I resisted, because over the course of time, it was revealed it's like that is an ever dwindling level of the same level of toxicity that was in my marriage. And it's not just me, guys. That's what the studies that Jacob really looked into began to reveal as well.
Yeah, and it's, a lot of times they talk about like twin flames in this context is almost like holding a mirror up to yourself. The people that you're finding, you are so like viscerally attracted to because they oftentimes will mimic or not mimic. That's they will have the same like traumas that you do, and you're able to see parts of yourself in them, and they in you, and becomes this like intertwined like we can help each other because we have the same experience, but then it just turns into this,
For
kind of,
empaths, it's like catnip, where you
yeah,
can
oh yeah, for sure, right? Yeah.
empathize with somebody else's. So that's why it can be so pronounced in people in the psychic communities as well.
Hmm. And that's what makes it, yeah, super intoxicating, and why it is often like we can liken these kind of relationships to not only like an obsessive compulsive area, but also like a substance abuse area, a
Mhm.
substance usage area. Let me rephrase that. I don't want to use the word abuse there. Usage, even, because it's just like that intoxication that you feel when you're with this person. You're like, finally, I found someone that gets me, that understands my trauma, that's been through it. Like, yes, while they may be your opposite, you guys are sharing this almost like trauma bonding, right? Through a
Yes.
similar
That's
background.
exactly what it is. It's a form of trauma bonding. And trauma bonding is
Mm,
historically when you bond with your abuser, but it can also occur with people who fit that energetic template, where they will do the same things as the people who hurt you in the past, because that's how they handle their damage. And was my ex
mhm.
husband very much like me in a lot of ways in terms of being bullied and a couple of other things? Yes, he was. And what part of what really happened was I had so much empathy for his trauma and his damage. I think he'd say the same thing about me. Because things didn't turn out so well for him either in terms of how everything ended. So I'm sure to him it was a very traumatic experience as well. And he also experienced transference on somebody that I think I accidentally magically conjured, I swear to God. Because there's
Mm.
in order to not like, because he just doesn't deserve to be raked over the coals for all time or something, in order to like give him some privacy on that, I'm not going to
Yeah,
state things that were present in that. But there is reason to
sure.
believe it's like, wow, that person just came out of nowhere and fulfilled absolutely everything that would cause him to also have transference and to escalate a relationship at an unhealthy rate, which took a lot of pressure off of me so that I could heal. And then the thing to remember, by the way, because this is going to upset some people, is that you're not being told you'll never have love. You're not being told that you'll never
Hmm.
have a soulmate. What you're being told is the level of intensity of this connection, if it is not reciprocated in a way that is healthy and takes your feelings into consideration, the chances are good that it is a toxic attachment that you need to
Hmm.
release in order to actually heal, to find that real love, to find that soulmate,
Agreed. Yeah.
find the love that you
Hmm.
really want, and it will be in a form that won't make you sick, that
Right.
won't exacerbate the trauma, won't exacerbate your insecurities, won't make you feel abandoned again. Because I see this most often in people with an insecure attachment style where these people are runners and so they abandon.
Hmm.
And so it literally goes back to essentially the mother wound for people in their psyche, and it digs up all their old trauma. And if you can recognize that part, you're like, great opportunity to clean out all those closets and heal for good. Yay, yay, let's go. But it's so, so difficult because it is tapping into your foundational wounds, your core wounds. And so if you feel that intensity, please understand part of the reason you're hearing this is it's information that your higher self would like you to have. And I don't define anything for anybody. And God knows there are always exceptions to everything that we find. Cold and clinical
Right.
research does not speak to how the heart feels. But I'm asking you,
Right.
is this relationship making you truly happy? Because the other thing that I have noticed in twin flame connections, and this, thank God, comes from another friend. I genuinely, I just can't talk about the stuff that has gone on for my clients because of obvious reasons, man. I don't even have to define it. But this was in another friend who also thought that she had a twin flame, and this person reminded her of an abusive parent quite a bit in the things that he would do. And she kept saying that she had this perfect unconditional love for him, that whenever she thought of him,
Hmm.
feeling would wash over her. And she didn't realize it when she was saying that, but that was the biggest red flag I'd ever heard. I was like, wait, what?
Oh yeah. Hmm.
That means your
Hmm.
brain is releasing oxytocin, which is a love chemical. And your brain is drugging itself with the thought of this person. And I did notice that
Hmm.
in my own regard where I was like, this does not feel healthy. This feels like being intoxicated when like an email would come in from this person that I was very attached to, and it would happen in the exact same manner. And that was why I spotted it so easily with my friend. Because all along I understood this person is a raging alcoholic. I want nothing to do with them. Because alcoholism degrades a person's better qualities over time and it gets worse and worse. And I watched my grandmother die of alcoholism. And it's why I was just like, no, 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 because she was bright, she was funny, she was college educated at a time that women frequently weren't. She was one of the most responsible people ever, and her life was ruined by a toxic connection to my grandfather, who I have come to understand must have been an abusive freak. And I do actually believe that she probably got pregnant in order to secure the relationship, because she had a very convoluted story about my father being born as a premature baby 3.5 full months before it was, before he should have been there, and a mere like 5.5 months after getting married. And it was very obvious from the time period that it's like, well, that didn't happen. But she had
Right.
incredibly detailed like descriptions of like, you didn't have fingernails and stuff, that it was very sad that she really genuinely did not want people to know that she had been pregnant before they got married. And I think his family didn't approve, and a couple of other things. But that's all the generational trauma and generational curses, because unfortunately, sometimes there's both of those involved. You're repeating an energy signature that is playing out over time. And so part of the reason that you might be listening to this is because the only way to break a cycle is to break a cycle. And that's what we're talking about with repatterning and redirecting when you feel that compulsion. And what you have to, like, if you need to stick signs up all over wherever you live, if you start thinking of X, then instead go drink something, get some exercise, call a friend, and talk about anything other than that. Put on music, dance around. You can also play, again, mind games, which help people focus. You have to drop into 3D as hard as you can when you start to feel that limerence or that attraction to somebody who's not present.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think that you are having a telepathic communication with somebody, please make sure that that person is equally present in your 3D life, and that the conversations that you have in the 3D are along the same lines, because that's the only way for it to be part of a grounded reality. Everything must be present
Right. Mm-hmm.
in a healthy manner in the 3D. And is it possible you really are tapping into somebody else's higher self? It is possible, but since we live in the 3D, things have to be in the 3D to really anchor them and be in balance with our elements, and to keep us spiritually
Right.
satisfied.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
I mean that's one thing. That's probably the biggest thing I've learned from you. Like even if we talk about something as like esoteric as magic, like everything has to be grounded in this sense of reality. Which is like you're the first person that kind of explained that to me in a way that made sense, and I enjoy that because like obviously I stay very grounded in this more like I come from a more scientific and like grounded mindset. So whenever I first started entering into this more esoteric world, I struggled with that a lot. Excuse me. And you really helped kind of bring that into focus, right? Where it's like, yes, these things happen in a more ephemeral kind of way, but everything is still grounded in this very 3D world that we live in.
it's
So it's
something
really, yeah,
that
I
if we
like that.
did
I've
it
always liked
in the
that.
earth element, water element, fire element, and air element. Air element is the idea that you may be conversing with somebody in the fifth dimension as a for instance, which people in these connections can believe that is happening. The water element is your emotions. The fire is the passion, the action, the drive. But the earth element is everything that is present in the 3D. It is the practical world, and you can touch it. If you are missing that key element, then it is not actually part of your reality. It is an ungrounded reality. In order to be a grounded
Hmm.
reality, it must have the element of earth or the 3D connection as well.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
hard, man, because like if we both sound a little bit like this is fun, we knew we had to do it, and we knew that it's like the last thing in the world either of us ever want to do is hurt people. But here's the
Right.
thing. If no one will tell you, listen, this is what this appears to be, and actually the origin story behind it is from somebody who did not know what they were talking about in terms of emotionally healthy
Hmm.
connection. Please understand, this is a modern day construct. It is not the Platonic ideal. That is what they assigned it to.
Exactly. Yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, you
You
took the
you
words
go
right out of
for
my
it,
mouth.
dude.
No,
Please.
no, it's exactly what it was. So like they took this really beautiful story and this really beautiful idea of like the origin of love and like, our connections with other people. And then they just like bastardized it into this like wooey idea of, like intense psychic and spiritual connection. I'm just like, oh my God. Like that's not what he meant at all whenever he was telling that story. But like go off sis, like do whatever you like, sell your book. But the more I read about it, the more like frustrating it became because it was like it's a really beautiful story, and I really like the main idea of it. But like to insinuate that, you are going to find this really deep, quote unquote twin flame relationship is just bleh. I didn't care for it at all.
So part of what happens for people is, and by the way, it's not that you won't have attractions when you're healthy, but you have to remember that what may be going on within you is an energetic imbalance between the feminine divine and the feminine masculine, meaning that the empaths of the world sometimes have an imbalance in their feminine divine energy, in which they need to grasp onto their personal power more, which is that authority, which is that self-discipline, which is some of the drives to achieve and to bring that into balance, because we all contain masculine and feminine energies. And so one of the things to also do is to, if you're like, I can't, because here's the thing, if you're hearing this and it's way, way too upsetting, then instead look at doing your inner child work. Look at doing your spiritual. Look at the 7 Energies podcast that we did to be able to heal all of your chakra points and to overcome your fear and overcome your anger and to start bringing yourself into balance. And the other thing that so frequently happens is that the people exhibiting the runner energy have their boundaries way, way too far out, like they don't let anybody get close to them. But the people in the chaser have historically poor boundaries, because they did not abused quite frequently. Quite frequently, they did not get a good message about their own self-worth, which would entail, hey, if that person's not treating you right, then bye-bye them. And that is really the only way to be self-protective. And that is about boundaries. That's what boundaries are. They're the things that allow you to protect you from people who will take and not give back. Pardon us, we're both a little froggy today. Honest to goodness, I think that it would be fair to say that everything we've talked about, Jacob, this made me the most nervous to have to talk about. Like I do all day. I don't want to hurt anybody, and know how much this concept,
of course,
means to people.
Right. And maybe if it's something you feel like you could do, I know we're running low on our time here, but like you'd be better suited, I think, to talk about it than me. The difference between like a twin flame connection and like a soulmate connection, because they are different. And I think that would help a lot of people as well, because like I'm not like poo-pooing this idea of like, like a strong spiritual connection with somebody else or any of these things. It's just like, I just think the twin flame mentality is the incorrect way to go about it. It is rooted in trauma. It is rooted in, like codependency. Whereas from what I've been able to tell thus far and what I've read, but I think that you are more knowledgeable on it, like soulmate connections and how they differ, and how a soulmate connection, and from what I can tell, at least, is a more healthy kind of like relationship to be looking for and being a part of.
Okay, so one of the things you have to understand is that your divine counterpart is not a twin flame, it is a soulmate. And I'm going to explain to you how a twin flame is from a soulmate in the way that you're trying to find them. So when you find a twin flame, it is essentially like holding up a flashlight into your shadow side and highlighting the things that you need to heal, which is often standard for your treatment. If you want to only be in a monogamous relationship and that person's not as prone to straying, that would be one of the things that you would need to be healing, not accepting love that is less than worthy of you. So your twin flame is opposite energy, and it gives you the opportunity to look deep within yourself, to find your own wounds and to heal for good. And you know what happens when you heal for good? It's called being integrated with your highest self, or being in alignment with your highest self, because you have balanced your masculine and your feminine energy. And again, I'm going to say this one more time. It has nothing to do with gender or biological function.
Right.
We all contain masculine and feminine energies. So your twin flame is there usually to help you highlight what you need to heal so that you can find your real soulmate. And your soulmate is somebody who is uniquely gifted in being able to support your hopes and your dreams. They have a sense of their own identity, because you are never meant to lose your identity into a relationship. That literally is what codependence is, where people don't understand where they begin and the other person ends. So soulmate connections actually have good boundaries around their treatment of one another, but they contain a respect for the other person's feelings, their thoughts, their intellect, and their goals. And meaning that a true soulmate, if a twin flame connection takes your scale like this in a completely out of balance. One person gives and gives, and the other person takes and takes, and it's wildly out of balance. Or the other person is focusing a ton of energy on somebody who's not even replying to them. That's also being out of balance. What a soulmate connection is it exists in that balance. It is not your opposite energy. It is your complementary, basically the thing that keeps you in balance is somebody who plays to your strengths and you to their weaknesses, but are complete by themselves. Your soulmate is actually somebody who has done all of their own work, and your soulmate is meant to be in your life to help you walk a path in your life that is purposeful, that does include romantic love, but it is not need-based. You are not insecure in a soulmate connection. You are not threatened in a soulmate connection. You are not frightened in a soulmate connection. If you have any of those markers of like the person, the person is like withdrawing from love, that's not a soulmate connection. It's more likely a twin flame connection. Soulmates are attracted to one another in a way where they don't have to be one, but rather they are like the thing that brings the scales of life completely into balance. So it's a very balanced relationship from the start. That's what your soulmate is. Somebody that you have a very balanced relationship, a good give and take. There is reciprocity and respect for the feelings of one another present. And our soulmates hard to find. We really don't find them until we're healed. And we have a whole bunch of different types of soulmates. We can have best friend soulmates. We can have healing soulmates. We can have chaos soulmates. We can have karmic partners. Those are all forms of karmic partner. The people who come into our lives to help us be taught a lesson. And the twin flames are about looking at yourself to see what you need to heal in your connection, in your attachment style, to be healthy, to attract the person who also contains your complementary instead of the darker aspect or the gravitational aspect. Someone who has the unique ability to support you in a balanced way and you them so that everything remains in balance. Twin flame connections out of balance, up and down, out of balance, very intense, very heavy. Soulmate connections are more effortless, and you really do, the person does not flee. The soulmate idea is the person who is meant to stand beside you in the light of the divine after you are in alignment with your true highest self, which is when you have access to your soul connection for you. Then you will have access to your soul connection to another person. But they will also be very, they will know who they are as well. You have to be independent in who you are and to truly know yourself and be able to take care of yourself and understand that a soulmate does not complete you. A soulmate finds you once you have completed you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally.
What do you have to add on that, sir?
Nothing. You did it beautifully. But yeah, no, I think the takeaway more than anything is it is your complementary, not your complementary person, not I'm not anti-person.
Not your missing piece.
I'm not
missing piece.
Right. Thank you. Yes.
Salt shaker to your pepper shaker type of thing. It is a
right
that is in balance, where they have strengths where you may have things that you're are more of a struggle for you, but it never becomes codependent because you have to be fully functional in self before you really find your true soulmate, because only when you are truly comfortable and whole within do you become in alignment with your actual divine connection, which connects you to your life's purpose and to your true soul. And it's difficult, because what we need to remember is if you're suffering from this, I beg of you to let yourself off the hook. You're literally societally programmed to think you need a partner. It's not your fault, guys.
Yeah, that is a part
Honest
of it too.
to goodness, there's a lot of propaganda behind needing a partner that has to do with making sure that women don't feel powerful by themselves. But women are very, very powerful. And so, I'm not saying, here's the thing, whenever we're talking about women needing to claim their own power, I'm not saying men are bad, although there's an increasing level of toxicity around the divine masculine because it's gotten out of control with the power and control, which turns to abuse very, very easily. And then women are programmed to believe they're meant to give and be selfless, which that's a breeding ground for codependency. Please remember and particularly if you're a mom, which, it's a wonderful thing to be a mom. Remember, anything you teach your children through how you treat yourself is how they will view themselves when they are a parent or when they are in a partnership. So if you let
Mm.
yourself dress in rags to make sure that your kids had everything, it does not actually teach them good things about the worth of women. And it's not saying you should neglect your children and wear haute couture. It's not what I'm saying. Just that sacrifice of self does not make you a good person. It wears you down to a nub, and then you are left with your self-image is only contained in the eyes of others, which means that you have all of your power has been given to somebody else because they can yank you around with what they want you to do, because your self-esteem actually lies in your relationships rather than in self. And it's self-esteem for a reason. Self. It's not about being selfish. Remember, being self-maintaining is not selfish, it's healthy. And again,
Hmm.
because I know how much this means to people emotionally, please hear me on this. The sole reason we're doing this and hanging it out there is so that really good people can heal and have the love that they truly deserve. Because the thing that I've noticed the most in this twin flame thing is it's the best human beings. It is the most loving,
Right.
most generous, the healers of this world who want to give all that human love to this very damaged target of their affection, which is often what the twin flame connection is. You are not meant to heal your romantic partner. That healing energy is for the world at large and for you. Partners are not projects. They're not patients
Hmm.
either. You are not meant to be healing a partner, and you are meant to heal yourself,
Hmm.
because if somebody else helps you heal, then what do they have? They have the key to your ability to be healthy in their hands rather than in yours. Okay? Which is why
Yeah.
rescuer and damsel relationships also don't work out. Which I think that's actually how my relationship with my ex-husband started out. Please understand that it just wasn't always a cluster, you know what, of awful. Like, I think this person entered into a relationship with largely good intent, but it became more and more toxic, and he drank more and more and more after initially quitting drinking in order to be with me, which I know far better than to ever do that again. Ever do that again. If somebody gives up something in order to be with you, that commitment to having given it up will only last as long as their desire to keep you in their life. And sometimes that's transient, which it was with my ex-husband. So, guys, that
Yeah.
was our podcast episode on what twin flames are. Are they toxic? They frequently are. There are also an
Yeah. Yeah.
opportunity to heal. And please understand that
Hmm.
there is hope and that there really is connection and love and feeling so much better about yourself. All of the love I used to try to give to other people, I kind of give to myself now. And I have such a happy life. And it doesn't mean that I'll never have another person in it. But if I don't, because it would have to be the right person, if I don't, I will be happy regardless, because that is what self love is. And that is what they really mean, where you have to love yourself first. If you're looking for somebody to
Hmm.
complete your puzzle with their piece, remember they can pick up their pieces and take them. And that leaves you with a bunch of holes.
Hmm.
So, honest to goodness,
Yep.
I hope this was helpful to people. I already covered at the top of it where you can find me. I'm at therisingmoon.com. Chromecast at the Rising Moon. This is Logical Magic, examining Esoterica. Jacob is Southern Style Readings on Facebook, and then Southern Style Readings at gmail.com. This, I think, is actually going to be the first episode of the second season. I just closed out season 2 with the episode from Prison to Purpose is, I believe, the next one that will be the capper on season 2. So you will or season 1. So you will likely have heard that before. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, if you've been distressed by anything, if you've been triggered by anything, please lean in heavily on self-care, and know that if you really think that life can't work out without one other person, and that person isn't you, it is an indication that you are healing some damage within, and you can totally do it. You can heal your damage, you can heal your trauma, you can be well, and you can have real and lasting love. Thank you for joining us. Take care, be well, heal your trauma, and get the love you deserve.